Hello, boys and girls of Credit Union Land, and welcome to episode 44 of the CUInsight Experience. My name is Randy Smith, and I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and it is my job on the show to have conversations with the best and the brightest of the credit union community. I get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Mollie Bell. Mollie is the Chief Development Officer at Ent Credit Union in Colorado Springs. Mollie has a long history in the credit union movement and has helped develop individuals and, quite honestly, the system from coast to coast. In this episode, we have a wide-ranging conversation that is all about leadership and developing people. This was a ton of fun. When I reached out to mutual friends, to a person, they talked about Mollie's passion for helping people meet their true potential. You'll have to listen to find out Mollie's path to credit unions. Teacher, law, restaurant owner in a small town in Texas. Yep, all on her path, and how each of those experiences helped her in her career in credit unions. This was a ton of fun. I don't think you'll be disappointed. So, without further ado, I give you my conversation with Mollie Bell. Enjoy. Mollie, welcome to the show. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Our paths have crossed a lot running around credit union land, but to actually get to take some time to talk to you, I was excited.
Me too. Yeah, I've gotten to just I feel like every time I've seen you, it's this fleeting moment of, hey, what's up? And then boom.
That we're gone.
Cross
Yeah.
paths and literally move on to the next thing.
We have a lot of mutual friends, and I reached out to some of them, which is always fun when I'm having somebody on the podcast. And I got to say, my favorite was, I basically just shot a bunch of people a message, and I was like, Mollie's going to be on the show. Tell me something about Mollie. And the one line in the title was, she's one of the most interesting and badass people I know. So I absolutely love that and said, this is going to be a blast.
That is fantastic. And oh my God, I feel that made me so happy. Thank you. You didn't tell me that before. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So, one of the things that kept coming up though, when I was talking, to people was that this common theme that you like to help build leaders. Take pride in developing people. And a couple different questions really, is first of all, is it true? But then also, is this something you've always had a passion for, people?
It is actually. And, I kind of reflecting on your question. First of all, I don't know if this is a fair phrase, but I feel humbly proud that is what you would hear from people. I don't necessarily think I intentionally set out to do it. I think it's kind of been this kind of organic thing. But when I reflect on it, absolutely. I think that to me as a leader, we are only a leader if we are lifting others up, if we are elevating those around us. And are you familiar with StrengthsFinder?
No.
That Clifton StrengthsFinder tool? I recommend it for teams.
Yep.
We're using it here at Ent. I've used it at a number of other organizations I've been at. But one of my strengths, actually, it might even be my top one, is maximizer. And the way that's described is you look for excellence in others and you look for the best of those around you. And it's funny, again, connecting those dots is that I think that's what I try to do for humans is I try to find a gift and then I try to help them see that gift for themselves. And one of my preachy lines is know thyself, heal thyself. And then through that, you become the very best leader that you can be, even if that leadership is just of self. So yeah.
That was what you just said there, tied into something that another person who responded to me, but it was that authentic leadership, being your authentic self. So know thyself. That's very interesting. Is this important for you? I guess, obviously, like at Ent and at other organizations that you've worked, but I get the feeling that you do this industry wide as well and are a mentor to many. So
I hope so. I hope. And again, I feel so humble in saying I guess that intentionally, unintentionally, it's certainly something that I've leaned into. I feel like I've had the gift, if you will, or the pleasure of getting to go and talk to different YP groups, for example. And I love that. I think, I love seeing the passion. I love seeing them get grounded in our movement. I love seeing that they've got the whole careers ahead of them and they've got the starry eyes and they're hungry, right? And I think, again, it's something that I'd love to go in and work with groups of YPs, really groups of any leader. And I would say anyone who aspires, right? So anyone has that aspirational dream to really have a positive impact in other people's lives. Again, regardless of role, regardless of title, regardless of where they're kind of planting themselves. I think it's really honing in and discovering that very best of self. Yeah. So, and I hope I get to keep doing an industry ride. You brought up Ent. I mean, Ent was kind enough, as we were talking about my transition from CUNA to here, I had already signed up for a number of, gigs, whether it was schools or conferences or events. And, I kept all of them and got to still be out in the industry. And Chad, the CEO here, has certainly encouraged me to keep doing that. So I hope so. And I hope I get to keep doing it.
That'd be terrible if you weren't. So interesting. I mean, before we hit record, you talked about YP groups right now, but we were talking before we hit record about, kind of giving people a chance who maybe don't fit the same bill, so whether it's younger or whatever it happens to be. Over and over on the podcast, we've talked about the war for talent. So, if there's, anything you want to throw out there, like you've seen firsthand the passion, the smarts of so many people that are maybe late 20s, early 30s, giving them a shot. Is that the answer?
Well, and I'll just say what we were talking about, right? We were talking a little bit about Lauren.
Absolutely.
And I'm so excited for her role in working with you guys, and so proud of you for giving that young, amazing leader a chance. And I think it's oftentimes where we look at leadership as these traditional old school roles. And sometimes that bends a little bit more conservative, not necessarily politically. I just mean, buttoned up. And I think that we need to really open our minds and eyes, so to speak, to the fact that there is a lot of talent out there that is hungry to be developed, to have a place, to feel connected. And it is, again, our job to go find those diamonds in the rough, maybe, and again, elevate them, even if it means on paper, we're elevating them a little early. Give them the challenge. One of the things I say, too, is go do the thing that makes you uncomfortable. Just go push yourself. Go stretch yourself. And I think maybe for some people, that means go find that person that you can help stretch and cultivate, be a sponsor of, and again, get into those positions that might be stretching them, and that act alone might be stretching you as a leader too, if that makes sense.
I love that. How is the national exposure that you've had in the past in being involved, in so many, what I would say is just so deeply in the system, system wide? How has that helped in your current role with the credit union?
It's helped a lot. I'm pretty open about sharing with people that I don't think there would be another industry I would want to work for. This wasn't my lifelong career, but it's certainly where my heart is. Yeah. And I should just tell you, and I don't even know if we've ever gotten to talk about this, that I loved my gig at CUNA. I loved everything about it. Jim was #best boss ever. Loved my team. I loved where we were going strategically. And it just kind of came along with this kind of amazing idea of letting me take some of these ideas and these preaches that I preach and put it into action at a large credit union who has big goals and big plans. And I love that. And so it not only has allowed me to continue to keep my foot half out the door sometimes and go play in the industry still, but that I bring right back here. I learn so much from others. Yeah. I learn constantly. I am ears to the ground and listening and learning and bringing that back in these walls. I was one of the teachers at CUNA's Member Experience Sales and Service School in August. And while I'm up there teaching and sharing all this stuff about building, a culture university, I'm listening to them and some of their experiences and some of the things they've done at their credit unions. And I'm bringing it right back in here and adding it to my list of ideas. And so it is definitely a symbiotic, circuitous relationship for sure. So
many of the people that we know obviously run in that circle, right? So it's in to a person, whether they're on the podcast or we have these conversations, it always seems like everybody's like, I get more, I bring back more than like what I'm putting out. That's basically, right? So it's Everybody should get involved. This was, you mentioned that, credit unions wasn't necessarily the career you chose. And when I was scanning the old interwebs, I saw you have a law degree from the University of Texas. And then Lauren, when we were talking, actually said you've had, you had some other stops before you came to credit unions. Law to credit unions. How did that happen?
That story's so hard to tell because there's like a bunch of other stuff in between. It is funny, like some of my jokes sometimes, again, to any professional who's aspiring is take the risk, do the thing that scares you. And upon reflection, I feel like that's kind of that's a signature for me. I have often joked, name a career, I've probably had it. I mean, I've been in sales, I've owned a restaurant, I was a teacher for 5 years, I taught both special ed and math. I get to bring that heart right into what I'm doing today, which is fantastic. I always wanted to go to law school, and I picked this super weird time in my life. I had the principal of the school I was working for had approached me and said, let's get you back to school. I want you to go get your master's. I think you should become an administrator. We want to support you in this endeavor, blah, blah, blah. And I, in the back of my mind, and kind of secretly, I also studied for the LSAT while I was studying for the GRE and taking it. So I just dove in and I thought, you know what? I live in Austin. I can't move. I'm a freaking single mom at the time, right? Like teaching, already dirt poor. And I'm like, well, let me keep adding to the thing. And I thought, I'm going to apply. And if I get in, I've got to go. I've just got to do this for myself. And lo and behold, I got in. And I'm like, holy shit, I got to, I told myself I'd go. So I did. I think that had life been different, I would, I was always attracted to like criminal law and like courtroom law. But my path didn't lead me there. I needed money. Quite frankly, I was like a millennial with a lot of student loan debt and looking out at my life ahead of me and thinking, maybe I didn't pick the smartest path. So I had also gotten a job offer from Accenture while I was in law school. So I went into consulting. Okay. And consulting led me to CUNY Mutual Group. And then the rest is kind of,
the rest is history, and we'll link to your bio. Okay. So I have a question. What kind of restaurant?
Oh my gosh. It was in Electra, Texas. Look it up. I think it was a town of about 3,000 people, and it was called Chicken Kitchen. Okay. And it was like fried chicken and homemade rolls and lots of veggies. And it was one of those places where you walked through and you told the person what you wanted on your little plate. And then,
the kind of Southern food, right? So
that's right.
That's fantastic. Right. Is there anything from the path that you took to credit unions that you still kind of hold with you, or that you think has been beneficial for, the rest of your career, whether it was teaching or getting the law degree?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I tell folks, I was actually just talking to somebody during DE. I just finished up DE with Lauren, as you know. Yeah.
Welcome.
I know, right?
It only took us 12 minutes to get to DE.
I think that somebody was thinking about going back to school, in particular law school. And I was saying, look, I would never, ever, there will never be anything I could have done like law school that would give me the kind of critical thinking. It taught me that Socratic method is for real. And that idea of thinking on your feet, speaking on your feet, connecting dots strategically, and seeing kind of that both sides of an equation. I don't think I would have ever, I bring that every day, literally, to how I work with teams. And, you brought up teaching too. I think that right now, for the first time in my career, which is thank goodness to Ent for letting me do this, but they gave me, I have HR and I lead training and development, and I have the philanthropy and, as parts of community development through our educational programs for members. And, it touches right back to that history of curriculum development and how you, impact learners and things like that. So, yeah, I think anything that we do in our experiences, we're going to pluck out those things and keep them with us forever. Absolutely.
Oh, yep. I agree. Something I was thinking about, and I've thought about it a lot recently, is, CUInsight's 11 years old now, almost. And at the time, I think it was about 11,000 credit unions when we started, and now we're down to the 5,000-ish mark, Is there something that, like, in your mind, and like, I was so interested to ask you this question because I think you have such a great perspective, of the industry. Is there something that needs to fundamentally change, or that soon now, or to stay relevant? Quite honestly.
It's worrisome, right?
Yeah. I mean, like you said earlier, I absolutely love this industry, and I can't imagine working in a different one. It's, so it is worrisome, right? Like, come on.
Worrisome.
Yeah.
It's when I was at Credit Union National Association, one of the things we used to talk about is while credit unions are consolidating, membership in some is growing. So I think if there's a silver lining, we are getting more consumers to do business with a credit union and become member owners of credit unions. So I think that's good. When we talk about fundamental shifts, I'll bring up a couple of things. One of my frustrations now leaving CUNA and being at a credit union is watching and listening to and talking to personally some credit unions about the Open Your Eyes campaign. I think that you don't know how often, whether it was when I was at, Feline, even a little bit at CUNA Mutual, and definitely at CUNA, my first few years there, listening to people say, well, people just don't recognize this. I can't tell how many strategic planning sessions I went to that was the board's concern. I've served on credit union boards myself as well, a large credit union and a middle-sized, medium-sized credit union. And again, you hear that constant theme is like, well, they don't even know what a credit union is. Do we just rebrand credit unions? Credit unions doesn't resonate, right? And it's like, now here we have this well-researched, pretty clever campaign, and there's a reticence of credit unions to dive in. And I think there's a number of logical reasons for some, but that confounds me a little bit. I don't think it's the panacea. I don't necessarily think it's going to fix all of our problems, because even as we talked about Open Your Eyes, we used to talk about, it's a cart horse thing. Like, we can get credit union or potential members to a credit union, but then can credit unions deliver all the goods?
Right.
And so to that last point, or that is my kind of second big point, is, Jim Power calls the collaboration our superpower. And I think that when you look at the amount that a USAA and a Bank of America and a Chase can invest in technology, both for their internal operations for scale and for the engagement with a customer, I just don't know how 5,000 different credit unions are going to do that. So I think we have to figure out how we break down these structures. And I used to noodle with, for example, John Carew at Georgia Zone Credit Union about, we've got 900 plus, almost, 950 or more CUSOs. Is that really what CUSOs are designed to do? Or should we be having like some really powerful one or two CUSOs that do amazing, great things for a larger number of credit unions? So I think our business model, there's components of it there, but I think we've backed into it in a way that doesn't allow us optimization. And I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's
I was going to say that makes a ton of sense. I think we've seen that in other countries, even where the credit unions are sharing back office and sharing a lot of more activities, right, to stay competitive. So, yeah, that's interesting with the CUSO. I'm like, that's just a few that are helping all. That could be a cool thing. I want to move on to the second part of the show. I was excited to get into this, the leadership and life hacks. It's my favorite time to get to ask questions. So what inspired you? You mentioned leaving CUNA. It was a positive experience there, but what inspired you to take the gig as the Chief Development Officer at Ent?
I tease people here, kind of my teasing statement here at Ent, when people ask here that in these four walls, I'll say there was three things. It was Colorado, beautiful. Like, I'm literally looking out at the Rocky Mountains and Pikes Peak right now. So it was also, like I said, it was a credit union with resources that had been very, it's a giant in Colorado Springs. But they really wanted to take their philanthropy, their community development, and this education and some of the goodness that we've been doing here in the Springs, and they want to take it, one day they want to go regional with it. And I love that idea of big growth and that big, hairy, audacious goal, and being part of that kind of a team. And Chad was the new CEO, and I had the opportunity to meet the board and Chad through strategic planning session and stuff like that. And, honestly, it wasn't the first credit union that had ever talked to me, but it was certainly the first where I felt connected to the vision and mission. I felt very connected to the team and to Chad as a new CEO in his position. And again, this idea that they would give me what I'm asking for. Like, I want people and I want culture and I want, let me dive in here in a place that I haven't gotten to touch, but I have lots of ideas about. And They did that for me. And so I think that, I made the joke earlier, I've been doling out lots of free advice over the last, like 7 years. And it was a way to take those ideas and all the things that I've been talking about and working with credit unions on and really make a bigger impact at one and test some things out, if that's fair.
You've been at Ent now about a year. Has the inspiration changed at all with time on the job?
No, if anything, I think I feel even more connected to it. I'm more increasingly passionate is how I would say it. Chad, much like Jim did, has kind of given me a charge and is letting me run, which is what I need. I need freedom and autonomy. And I think that we are building some cool stuff. And I hope I get to talk to the industry in a year and give you guys a roadmap for some of the stuff that we are on building around culture and Ent University and how we reshape development of people and management and things like that. So I'm really excited about it. We have like 950 people on the team now, and we're probably going to hire another 200 in the next 12 months. And, there's a real scary thing about that, about keeping that connectivity among team members and having us really, truly feel like one living, breathing organism that is Ent Credit Union. And I think that bringing that to life and keeping that all together will be an amazing endeavor.
Does sound kind of scary in a way. How do you keep the culture that you're building and you've built, and when you're bringing in that many new people? I mean, that's another 20% of the workforce, basically, right? So,
it's why it's an imperative, and it's so strategically important for us. I call culture the umbrella strategy. You really, to me, it's hard to execute any of your strategic plan if you don't have a very intentionally well thought out, well planned culture. Oftentimes culture just becomes this nebulous, word salad. And what we're trying to do, literally my 9 months, a little over 9 months now that I've been here, 10 months, is I've listened to hundreds of people that work here. I'm really trying to deeply understand how we define our culture today, what those gems are that we want to polish and keep, and what are those things we need to maybe put in the rubbish bin and let go of. And we've created 3 cultural attributes that we're centering everything on. We have behavioral attributes that align to those. We're just now in the socialization phase. We're leading some what we're calling trailblazing treks to come up with ideas from staff on how we make our culture more tangible and real, and applying it across the entire workforce. So,
are the trailblazing treks literal? Do you guys go out hiking since you're in the Rockies, or?
I'm not going to give away our secret sauce.
Okay, all right. That's
No, yeah, it's exciting stuff. And I think, there's a reason that we're calling it a trailblazing trek.
That's awesome.
When I get more meat on the bones, though, I really would love to share it. I'm serious.
Oh, absolutely. And we'd love it. I'm sure everybody would love to hear about it. So you mentioned that like one of the things that attracted you, and even, in past positions, like having that space to run, basically, right? So like, what would your leadership style be? I know for me, there's a reason why I hired Lauren, right? I'm all over the board. So that makes it difficult for people that work for me. But
I know, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, how would you describe your leadership style?
It's funny. We had our strategic planning session. We did the VP and chief group all took part in both Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinders. And then we were able to take all the attributes and kind of create these cards that they could put in their office. And I'm literally holding mine right now. And on the back, it says, one exciting challenge after another, argues both sides of a point just to learn, test the limits, and is the most inventive. So I think that, if I had to sum that up, I think it's an enthusiastic ideator. And I kind of and I have to tell my team this all the time, please challenge me, question everything, because I love to question everything. So I think that probably sums it up.
How would your team describe your leadership style?
That I make them insane because of all of my justice. They would describe that the same way too. I think that it was pretty true to self. As you said earlier, I pride myself on this notion of authenticity, and gosh darn it, we should work at places that just let who we are walk in the door every day. And So I don't think that how they would, describe me would be too much different than how I see myself.
Than how you see yourself. Yeah. Jill says hello, by the way, but she also talks a lot about the whole human coming to work, right? So it's.
Yes. I am so proud. I mean, this is a total aside, but I just love what she's doing. And I will tell you, at DE, Chad shared with us this video that was done by Accenture. And I felt kind of connected to it, having been a former Accentureite. And it was Inclusion Starts with I. And if you haven't seen it, it is amazing. And I sent it as a link to the chiefs while I was at DE. And I think we were really connecting with it. And this idea of, war for talent. I know you have so many guests on your show that have talked about this, but my goodness, the first and foremost is how do we build that inclusivity? Let people be who they are, right? We are all just humans trying to do the very best we can every day. Why can't we all just wrap our arms around ourselves and each other? And anyway, it's fantastic though, if y'all haven't seen it.
We'll make sure to link to it also in the show notes. Hopefully everybody can see it. I have not seen it. So you mentioned 10 months in. When you walked in, what's the greatest thing? Is there something about your team that just blew you away when you stepped in the door as you've got to know them better?
Yeah, we have longevity here. We have people that come to work for Ent and stay. That can be both a gift and a curse. I think what I see is the gift side of it. They are so passionate about this credit union and the impact that Ent has had in our community. And they so connect with the vision that we have for taking that philanthropic impact across, other communities. I think that history, in other words, that they bring and all of that they've seen around Ent's changes, they bring it, and then they bring it in this open-minded way of, connecting to the vision every day. I just love it. And I will tell you, one of the things culturally that Ent has gotten right is we are here for one reason only. And it's the members who have chosen to do business with us, period, end of story. So.
Is there something the team can already finish your sentence when they hear you start saying it?
One of the things I coach people on is feedback is a gift. And then I will go on and say, it is a gift, however, that's oftentimes hard to package and deliver, and sometimes really hard to unpack and appreciate. And so, and they've heard me talk when I start down that path of don't forget that feedback, they'll go, oh, I know. And it's hard to unpack, and it's hard to deliver, and it's hard,
We got it, Molly. I love that. Right? I absolutely love that question because I think it makes people think about it. They're like, oh yeah, there is something. So there's
probably like 100 more. Like I say shitballs a lot.
I love it.
Not that that's a sentence to finish, but they know, they know the thing.
They know that's coming. When you think back to earlier in your career, is there a mistake that you made, or like a mistake that you see you coached a lot of people that you see young leaders make over and over again?
First of all, I think, mistakes are really lessons upon reflection, right? I don't know that. I think if you're not making mistakes, you're not taking risks, and that's never a good thing. And so tying those two together is, I've actually told my daughter before on that notion of being confident in the risk taking. I said, I wish that I was as confident at 30 as I was at 40. And now at 50 plus, I wish I was as confident at 40 as I am now. Yep. So it's like, how can you, and it's why I so much preach this notion of authenticity and how well you know yourself so deeply and wholly, so that you can really lean into the confident of who you really are. Being confident, let me say it differently, in who you really are. Yep. Know your values, know what drives you, know your passion, know your purpose, and figure all that out early so that you can just be confident in it. And I see that in leaders like Lauren. I see that in people that, gosh darn it, and let's congratulate those people that can just really know who they are and freaking go get it, man. Go get it.
I respect that so much because I know for myself that was more of a struggle, right? Figuring out who I was. So it took me a lot longer than I wasn't 25 or 30. I think I was probably closer to 35 or 40 before I figured that out. So but life's fantastic once you do. So I would recommend that earlier in life too. Has there been a piece of advice or life lesson that you find yourself kind of clinging to or carrying with you throughout your career?
One of the things that I talk about with authenticity is it does not come without emotional intelligence. And that was something that was a leader had shared with me early on. I had gotten promoted fairly quickly for Accenture up into, a manager to senior manager type role. And, I live my expressions, like, exactly what I'm thinking. And, I had that feedback one time that when I'm with a client and I don't respect him, maybe I don't show it all over my face. So when I'm disagreeing, for example, so it's this balance of authenticity and being who you are, but the gift of being authentic doesn't come without you having some emotional intelligence about your audience and the situations around you. So it's being situational savvy with that authenticity. So, yeah.
And maybe a little better, more poker face, or do you just still let it
occasional
out?
Poker face would not be thing.
I tend not to have one either. I wear my emotions on my face. So, is there a hack that you have that if you run into a problem, you've talked about, you like tackling a big problem or having that, the next adventure out there, basically. If you run into a wall, what do you do to get to the other side? Do you have hacks?
Anyone that knows me well will not be surprised to say that as an extrovert, I have to find the person and the trusted person to talk to. Right. So my hack really is nothing more or less than that. I have to give props to my husband, who's so kind and patient with me. And I call him my executive coach. So sometimes when I have hit that wall or I'm so frustrated, I coach others to first look in the mirror. Right. So that's part of my hack. Look at the mirror. What did I bring to the table that would have caused that situation in the first place? So I try really hard to reflect, but I also, in my extroversion, will talk to a trusted friend or my husband or somebody else to kind of truly someone in my circle. In other words, it's going to tell me the truth, right? And what could I have done differently, or how else may I have been able to think about something? And sometimes even just talking about it will lead me down my own path of, maybe how to knock down the wall or the thing. So yeah.
Is that circle credit union folks or people outside of the industry, a combination of both?
All of the above. When I do these development courses, if you want to call them that, sessions, and I've gotten to do some here at Ent, one of the things I say is you should document in your journal or whatever you document things in is who is your circle of truth tellers? You need your circle of advisors. A book I read years ago called it Your Personal Board of Directors. It does not have to be people. And for me, it's not necessarily just all credit union people. No, a lot of it is, but sometimes it's family, but it's like your mix of mentors and sponsors and coaches and people that will always, they care enough about you to listen with heart, and they will always tell you the truth and help you, help guide you down the path. So, yeah.
It's important to have that circle, that's for sure. If you have a free day, nothing on the calendar, what passions do you have outside of credit unions? What does work-life integration look like to Mollie?
My good friend Tansley runs miles and miles and miles and does all the exercise. And
said on the podcast, she wakes up at an ungodly hour, too. So.
I know it to be true. I stayed with her and listened to that wake up, and I'm like, holy Hannah, what is going on? I'm more of a walker. I love hiking. And I will tell you, Colorado is so attractive to me because I bought acreage when I moved here because I wanted space, literally like the Dixie Chicks, wide open spaces kind of thing. I love looking at the mountains in the distance and just going on a long walk, maybe with my dogs, maybe by myself. But I like the outdoors. In other words, breathing in that fresh air. I literally hug trees. Like, I'm not just a tree hugging vegan. I literally go and hug the tree and look at the flower and take all the pictures of the thing. And it's such a release for me. Yeah.
Sounds like you're in the right place. So
yes.
I do want to be respectful of your time. So I'd like to move on to the third part of the show, the rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid. Your answers don't have to be. Do you remember the first time you got into trouble, like memorable trouble that you can share with us at least?
So I was a rebel kid, and we would be here another like, I don't know, 60 minutes if I went through. Like, I don't know if I could remember the first because there's so many. I constantly pushed the boundaries and pushed my dad's buttons. But gosh, I remember like in second grade, you remember the pumping kids on your bicycle? You remember the handlebar thing?
Yep.
I was doing that with a girl and I was not allowed to. And she fell, we crashed, she broke her glasses. It was awful. And of course I tried to lie my way out of it. And got caught. And oh my gosh, that was a bad one. That might have been my first one, but trust me, I have a list of hundreds.
There was many more. So do you have any daily routines that if you don't do, your day just feels off?
I talked earlier about walking. I think, being here and with the animals and stuff like that, I think getting outside and walking, whether it's at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, is really grounding for me. I also preach journaling. I know you journal, and I love that you talk about that. And I've heard you talk about it on the podcast. I think that I wish I did it daily, but I will tell you that those moments where I'm really feeling the thing, I love to pick up a journal. I have them all over the house. I don't just have one and finish it. Like I have like all over the place, and I'll just pick something up and brain dump. But that's really healing for me as well. Oh yeah.
I've talked about a lot on here. I use the term, I'm a born again journaler. I talk about it so much. So
I love
that. It's been an amazing thing for me. Someone who has such a scattered mind to be able to just dump everything out every morning. So that's for sure. The random question. What's the best album of all time? That one you can listen to from front to back.
So I'm an 80s girl, right? And I went through a rocker phase. So 1984 Van Halen was not only my favorite album for a long time, it was my first big concert to go to. It was a big ass deal. Yeah. Like I had to sneak out of the house. There I go, breaking the rules again. Run off with friends to Dallas from Wichita Falls to go see them in concert. If you ask me that question today, though, I have such a wide, I listened in the morning to everything from Vampire Weekend and the Bleachers, like more alternative rock, to Dixie Chicks and old school Texas country like Robert Earl Keen. And so, yeah, favorites are hard for me. It kind of goes all over the place. But the first one was 1984. I
was just going to say, your 1984 album brought a flashback for me because my stepbrother and I one summer like on one of those swimming docks that they have up in the Midwest, we would play jump and jump off the dock every time, then have to swim in to rewind it, on like a boom box and do it all over again. So yeah, absolutely. You're bringing up fond memories for me. So
a sad fact is that in my dorm room freshman year, I had a poster of Eddie Van Halen.
There you go.
What a dork I was. Yeah.
My first concert was also sneaking out, not being told I couldn't go, then going with friends who could go. And that was to see actually Metallica back in the day.
Nice.
So yeah.
That's awesome.
Many years ago. I'm a reader. Jill and I have stacks of books around the house. Most have been recommended to us. You've mentioned a few on the show already. Is there a book that you've either gifted over time or you just think everybody should read?
Again, that narrowing down to one is always hard for me. On a nonfiction, and more recently, I've been handing out like candy Dare to Lead. By Brené Brown. I think, and I think that's been mentioned on your show before. Absolutely. I think that, to me, that there is this future in leading with heart, and it goes back to how we break down our own armor. I used to say, and again, some of these leadership sessions I've given before, is like we all carry around a trunk full of junk, and we have to unpack our own junk to be the very best leaders we can be. And I feel like Brené just totally channels that in a very research-driven way, and I love it.
Yeah, I actually re-listened. I'd read it, and then I just re-listened over the summer to it on Audible while I was walking around Budapest, of all places, listening to Brené Brown. So,
I have to credit to Greg Micklig is the one that, he kind of talked about reading that when I was kind of on my transition out of CUNA, and it made my heart so happy for so many reasons, because I think that, he and I really did, again, kind of preach Brené Brown before I even knew who she was. And so I really owe him a shout out for, kind of pushing that. And I think he did some work with his team with it and stuff like that. So, yeah, anyway.
That's awesome. As you've gotten older, What's become more important to you? And my favorite part of this question, what has become less important?
I think that what's become important is an understanding that life is going to unfold and it will be okay, right? It just unfolds. And so it goes, kind of goes with this thing that we can't all be perfect. We can't always plan the thing out. And so that ties into what I talked about earlier about how you take risks and being bold enough and courageous enough to do it. And so I think that what more of is that notion of just knowing who I am and being confident in who I am, knowing I bring value and knowing what that value is.
Absolutely.
Anything becoming less of, I think that all of us at certain times early in our career, we probably worry a little bit about what the other person's thinking, right? And I've heard Tansy talk about it too. And I think I was never that worried. Again, I've always pretty much been a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. But I think that sometimes we let others hold us back because we're worried about what they're going to think or say. So I've kind of tossed that out the window a little bit, maybe sometimes to a fault when somebody's like, hold on, Tonto, slow down. Let's, revisit this thing you're trying to do. But
seems like that would be some strength if we all had more of that, like when we were 25. So there's a question I didn't send you, but I know you listen to the podcast, so you might be prepared for it. But when you hear the word success, who's the first person that comes to mind?
It might be two people, my mom and my daddy, and I'm saying that in the best Southern girl way. I use my dad's story when I talk about that getting to know thyself. When I became an adult, my dad and I grew up, it was very contentious. Like I said, I was a rule breaker. He's an officer in the Air Force. He was a pilot, like all the testosterone, all the rule making, all the, hard and fast things. But when I understood his story to help me understand my story, he grew up on the wrong side of the tracks in a very poor household with a single mom in the 40s and 50s when that was unheard of. And, he set out a goal at a pretty young age to be a pilot. And he also set out a goal to raise his children to always be able to stand on their own 2 feet and never need to rely on someone else. And maybe to a fault, he's created that in his daughters. But I look at what he's been able to achieve and setting that kind of goal out and doing it in a huge way. He wasn't just a pilot. He was a fighter pilot. He was a NATO training fighter pilot. And my mom for supporting him all the years and just taking care of us girls. They embody that for me.
That's beautiful. And in a great way to wrap it up. I thank you again for being on the show. Last question I have for you. Do you have any final asks of our listeners or final thoughts you'd like to share?
Be brave. There's my final thought. Be brave. Be vulnerable and be brave. How about that? That
is the perfect way to end. We'll link to everything we talked about in the show notes. This has been amazing. I'm so glad we got to do this. If people have more questions of you, Mollie, is there a preferred way, Twitter, LinkedIn, email that they can reach out to you?
Oh, gosh, all the things we get buried in, right? First of all, I want to say thank you to you so much. And then absolutely, I'm kind of on all the things. My work email might be the most frequently looked at, but I'm on Twitter at Mollie Bell CU. So, I would love to talk and connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Mollie. I hope you have an amazing day and hopefully see you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Randy. I appreciate you.